Tanya, welcome to Coffee and Tea with CarrieVee.
I'm so excited to be here. We're gonna have a lot of fun.
Oh, we are. I'm so excited to have you here. I've been looking forward to this all day. I even got up this morning humming and told my husband, Tanya's coming on the show today. I'm so
That
excited.
makes me happy. That makes me so happy.
It makes me happy too. And your smile is beautiful. I am so excited to dive into who you are. So let's just start with this question. What got you out of bed this morning? What wakes you up every day excited to go?
Oh, I think getting to choose what I do. I think that's what gets me fired up. And it's not that every day is like sunshine and lollipops. There are
Right.
days where I have to drag myself out of bed just like everybody else. But honestly, when I go back over the timeline of my life, that moment where I really started to accept that my choices are my choices and I have full ownership over my calendar and who I am and how I receive things,
Yes.
that changed everything for me because I was no longer a victim of whatever mood other people were in or whatever was happening in the world or the universe is against me or whatever else. It really was taking ownership. So I love that I wake up and I'm like, what am I going to choose to do today? How do I want to live today? And that makes it so much easier to get up, even on days where you're doing not fun things like taxes. Still got to do those things, right? Not
Yes.
choosing to do my taxes, but I can choose to do my taxes and then do something fun right afterwards. Or I can choose to, right? Like there's lots of ways we can make it work. So it's not so hard. Life doesn't have to be so hard.
Yes. Let's go a little deeper on that. Someone woke up today, someone who is listening to us right now, woke up today and that was their first thought. Why is life so hard?
Yeah.
What would you tell them if they came to you and said, Tanya, how can life be not so hard for me?
Well, I would say, first of all, we're all going to have seasons where life feels hard. Just because like I just said, like I wake up and I feel like I get to choose doesn't mean there's not seasons that are hard.
Exactly.
There are hard seasons, there are easy seasons, there are lighter seasons and heavier seasons. And if you go back and you start to track that timeline, your breadcrumbs of your life, you're going to see there have been hard seasons in the past, followed by easier, lighter seasons, followed by some harder seasons. And it's this cyclical kind of thing that we go through as part of being human, as part of our human experience.
Yes.
So if you're in a season where things feel hard, know that it's not forever. Know that you are never stuck. You know, I think so often we think the opposite of stuck is unstuck. Like there's this magical moment where unicorns shoot out of the sky and it's like, I'm unstuck. And that's not true. The opposite of stuck is action, taking a little bit of ownership. And that action doesn't have to be big. Because I think that's the thing. When you're in the deep, dark recesses of a hard time, it can feel really, really dark. And it can feel like, I don't even know what to do. And then that idea of getting out of that valley or out of that hole feels daunting. And the truth is, it's not a big giant step that gets you unstuck. It's a small step. It's a tiny step. It's making a decision and saying, this is where I want to go. And then taking just a few minutes to make that initial step. When you take that first small step, the second step becomes easier. And the third step just follows naturally. And then the fourth step, you're like running. And all of a sudden, there you are out of that dark season.
Yes.
And I say that and it sounds easy when I say it. It's not easy to get out of those dark places. I know, I've been in those dark places. I've been there with you. You just couldn't see me because it was so dark in those valleys. But it is making that decision that I don't have to stay here forever. Seeing that tiny bit of light at the end of the tunnel and then making one small step towards it. That's huge.
Yes. It is huge. I love that you brought that up and that you termed it that way. The opposite isn't getting unstuck. It's action, taking those action steps, and that it doesn't have to be this massive leap.
Right. Well, and there again, what are we going back to? Ownership, right? Because the idea that the opposite of stuck is unstuck means there's some magic in that moment. And there is no magic in that moment. It's you taking ownership and saying, I'm going to choose to do something small, something that feels so tiny. Maybe I might think it's insignificant, but it is getting me moving in the direction I want. So it's you choosing that you are ready to move out. Easier said than done. That first decision is the most difficult. But the truth is, a lot of times what we want, what we desire, what we dream of is oftentimes on the other side of 5 minutes of difficulty, a 5-minute hard conversation you have to have with a spouse or a family member, or it's on the other 5 minutes of figuring out the phone number to call to make the appointment, or it's on the other 5 minutes. It's just 5 minutes of discomfort, but we let that 5 minutes dictate the next 50 years of our lives.
Oh, isn't that true? Isn't that true?
Mhm.
Oh, that was deep. I just want everybody to take a minute to think about that. We let those uncomfortable 5 minutes dictate maybe even the rest of our lives.
Without question. It's funny, I actually just had this conversation with my son. So my son is, I can't even believe I'm saying this, but he is going to be 20 in like a week. I can't believe he's not going to be a teenager because I'm only like 26. So I don't understand how that math works. But he's 20, he's in college, he's a sophomore, and he was going through some difficulties at college. And I said to him, you just need to have the conversation. I said, after the first 5 minutes of having this conversation, all the uncomfortableness is gone.
Yes.
Because the weight of it is the anticipation. It's the worrying about it. It's the stressing about it. Once you get that first couple of sentences out, all of a sudden your shoulders feel lighter, things feel easier, and the conversation just flows.
Yes.
But that 5 minutes is 5 minutes out of the multitude of moments just in this one day alone that we get to experience.
Yes.
We let that hold us back.
Oh, and how tragic when we have this.
Completely tragic. Because the thing is that 5 minutes of uncomfortableness isn't really more uncomfortable than where we are right now. The reason we want to move or change or shift is because we are not comfortable, but we become really comfortable in our uncomfortableness. We're like, well, this is just the way things are. This is just how things are going to be.
Yeah.
And we settle into that. And the truth is, that's a lie. We're telling ourselves a lie that this is just how it has to be. Choose the 5 minutes of extreme discomfort to be able to get to that place you want to go.
Yes. One of the phrases that I absolutely love to hate is, well, it is what it is. I just want to, when people say that to me, I just want to shake them and say, but it doesn't have to be.
Doesn't have to be. It really doesn't. And I think really the truth is, if you look at anyone you admire, anyone that you look at as being successful or amazing or incredible, when you dive into it, part of what you love about those people is how they overcame. They were in deep, dark places, maybe where you are now, right? They're in these and they overcome them. And we love the story of the underdog, unless we're the underdog. And then we're like, this is just how it is. And that's what it is. It's overcoming. It's choosing to step out of where this is what it always is. Yes. We get sold this bill of goods that's just, it's just a lie society tells us, that if you do these things, everything's going to be okay. If you go to school, if you make good grades, then you go to a good college. If you go to a good college, then you get a good job. If you get a good job, you get a good spouse. If you get a good spouse, you have good kids. And then all of a sudden it's like, and then you get to retire and then you get to live. And it's like, well, none of that is true. None of that is accurate at all. And the truth is, being in a deep, dark hole isn't necessarily a punishment for where you are. A lot of times there's a lesson in there. And overcoming that, and you'll see this in other people's life stories, overcoming that's what gets them to where they want to go. And I think that's powerful, recognizing that the best laid plans are the plans that aren't even where you thought you would be. I know I'm nowhere near where I thought I would be when I set out as an adult at the age of like 23, what I thought my life path would be. I am 100 miles away from where I ever anticipated. And yet this is where I was meant to be all along. I just didn't know. I didn't know. Yeah. And that's powerful to recognize.
It is powerful to recognize. It's like the opposition and the provision are all in the struggle that we're in. We don't have to say that it's good or bad. It just is. It just is. That's
the thing that has been really the theme of my life, is understanding there is no good, there is no bad, there just is. If we were to lay out our timeline of our life from birth until death and beyond, if you want to go there, it's really long, but we have these blinders and we only look at what our life looks like now. And we judge every experience, everything that comes our way as good or bad. And when I look at my timeline and I shift my thinking, right? Or I shift at how I look at it. I look at things in my past that I judged as great. Oh my gosh, that guy called me back. Oh, we're dating. Oh my God, worst relationship ever. It wasn't good.
Yes.
It was bad, right?
Yeah.
Things in my past that I often judged as bad or terrible or horrible ended up being for good because they got me to where I am. So we have to let go of that judgment in the moment because we
Yes.
don't see the big picture. We have
Exactly.
no understanding of where we're truly going. We have an idea of where we think we want to go, but that may
Yeah.
be totally wrong.
It may be. So you are a writer, and I would love to know what got you writing. And if you would tell us a little bit about your books. I've read them. The Joy of Missing Out, I thought, was fabulous. On
Thank
Purpose.
you.
You're welcome. Thank you for writing it. On Purpose, helping women step into this extraordinary life and not settling for ordinary. What put you on this path? Because I don't know if when you were 23, if you thought you were going to be an author, but thank God you are.
Thank you.
So I would love to hear a little bit of that journey. And I know everybody listening would love to know that too.
Yeah. Well, I often tell people that I think a lot of the places you are now are hidden in our past. So if you want to go back in my timeline and you want to look at where those seeds were first planted, I would say it was in the 6th grade in Mr. Carlisle's English class when I wrote my first book. Not a book on productivity at all, not a book on systems or for women or any of those things, but a book called Aunt Liza's Treasure, which had pop-ups in it because I am an overachiever. But I wrote a book and it was a short book, but it was like a couple of chapters long. And I thought, this was amazing. Like I loved writing. And I thought maybe one day, as we all do when we're kids, maybe I could be a writer. And then I put that dream on a shelf as I adulted and was like, oh, that's silly. Not going to be a writer, not going to be a writer, right? That's kind of a childhood dream. But a lot of times those childhood dreams are really seeped in what we're here for. And so I thought every year I'd kind of take that dream off the shelf and go, maybe I could write a book. And I'd go, nope, I'm going to put it back on the shelf. Let's gather some more dust up there, right? Just keep gathering more dust. And so it was funny because one year I'd take it, it was in October, and I had kind of revisited that dream, like, oh, is this year the year I'm going to write a book? And I thought, no, this is not the year. I've got these things going on. All this stuff is happening. I've got X, Y, and Z, 5,000 excuses. And I made that decision. And 2 weeks later, I got a call from a publishing house. We want you to write a book. And I was like, what? I just decided I wasn't writing a book. And so I was like, well, this is interesting. And of course, this is not a book with pop-ups. This is going to be a book about productivity. And I thought, well, that's interesting because I just decided I wasn't going to do it. 2 weeks later, a second publishing house reached out to me. Now I know how the universe works. So I'm like, got it, God. Like, okay, apparently I need to really think seriously about writing a book. I made the decision, though, to tell both those publishing houses no, because I decided if I wanted to write a book, I wanted to write the book I wanted to write, not the book somebody else wanted me to write. So I took that and was like, okay, let me write a proposal. Let me do it the old school way. I'm going to really flesh out what I want to talk about. And so I did that, got myself an agent, and ended up with 7 offers from publishing houses. So the book went to auction, and it's one of those things too, where it's like, you know, those breadcrumbs are there and you get these messages or these ideas or these thoughts. And then it's like, okay, now I'm going to hit the gas on it. And then it's even better than you anticipated.
Yes.
So I've always loved writing, all different kinds of writing. Never knew I'd be a nonfiction writer, though. And so that's why I think when I wrote both my books, The Joy of Missing Out and On Purpose, I love to tell stories because then it weaves in some of that kind of fictional storytelling type of tropes that you can have. Because I want it to be more interesting. A lot of nonfiction books are really dry and very just like, I don't know. Here, do this, do that, do this. And I wanted it to feel immersive, like you were listening to a story and you were learning things at the same time. So that's really how I got started writing both of my books, The Joy of Missing Out and On Purpose, was, you know, these little breadcrumbs were there. And then I made the decision to step forward with them. And I love writing. Writing is one of those things that I've rediscovered as an adult. I forgot how much I loved it.
Yeah, right.
So it's great to get to do it as a job, to get paid to do it.
Yes, that is fantastic. Where did you come up with the titles for your books? They're both fantastic.
Titling is probably one of the most difficult things. Although if you said writing's most difficult, editing's most difficult, it's all difficult.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
titling, it is, how do you summarize your book in just a couple of words that will catch people's eye, that will make them want to pick up and get excited about it? And, there's so much talk about FOMO and fear of missing out, which I think really does lend us to this idea that we have to say yes to everything. And if we say no, opportunity only knocks once and we're going to miss out.
Mhm.
And I wanted people to really understand that that's not making you happy. There's so much joy in choosing to miss out. Again, having that ownership. I'm choosing not to do these things. I'm choosing to say no to these things because that does bring joy.
Yeah.
So it wasn't an easy journey. And there's lots of, I have pages and pages where we just wrote out different title ideas, but the joy of missing out kept coming back around and around and again. And it was like, this is what and I had to fight my publisher for it. But I was like, this is the name of the book. This is absolutely what I believe it should be. And same with On Purpose, where I had an idea. I loved the double entendre of on purpose, living on purpose, living intentionally, but also living on track with a purpose. So a purpose out ahead of you. So it's kind of this double-edged meaning of purpose that I really wanted to convey with that title. But it's hard to kind of sum everything up in one quick little title for people to see on a book and go, yes, I want to read that.
Well, you knocked it out of the park on both of them.
Thank you.
Of them. You're welcome. I can remember I shared with this with you before we hit record, that the joy of missing out, I was walking the dog and listening, and I would back it up and listen to it again and go, oh, yeah, that makes
I love it.
so much sense, and I'm holding the phone and backtracking while the dog's pulling me forward. And I'm like, just wait, just wait. I have to hear this again. Yeah.
That's why I wanted to read the books myself too. It was really important to me to read the books because, and I think this is the greatest compliment I get when people have the audiobook. They're like, it's like having you sitting next to me on the couch. Like we're having a conversation and I'm having it with a great girlfriend who just gets me, but also kind of gives me the pushes that I really need.
Yes.
And I'm like that. And to hear you say that you were like, yes, oh, that's what, right. Like you're having a conversation back to me in my audiobook, that makes me extraordinarily happy. That's exactly why I wrote the book. I wanted to start those conversations. I wanted it to feel like you were having that conversation with me as well.
Well, the joy of missing out, hearing that title, is exactly why I got the book, because I loved the perspective that I wasn't missing really anything. I was choosing a more joyous life by choosing to say no to some things. I absolutely needed that at that time in my life, and it has stuck with me.
Nice. I like that. I really like that because, and I try to make this simple. The message is simple. They're impactful. I call it small, huge movements, simple to implement, easy to manage, but monumental in the impact it can make. I want it to not feel like one more thing to do. Yes. We don't need one more thing to do. No, we don't. It needs to feel easy. It needs to feel light. It needs to feel simple to remember. And so a lot of the things I put into that book were like, oh, okay, I can do this. And that's what gets me excited. So I love that you still use the book, reference the book. It's
recommend the book. Yes. So moving on to On Purpose. I know there are a few sections in the book, and in the beginning of the book, you tell us that we will be tempted or may be tempted to flip around, but you also highly encourage us to do this book in order, or to read this book in order, to follow it in order. Can you tell us why? I am that person who flips through the book and
you're that person.
I'm that person.
Well, that message was directly for you. So
it sure was. I was like, oh,
I'm glad you heard it. Well, okay. If we go back in my timeline yet again, you'll see that I used to be a teacher. I taught school for several years and I've written curriculum. And so anytime that I'm writing a book or I'm creating a podcast season or I'm doing any sort of teaching, whether it's on stage or anywhere else, I'm very intentional with how I create that journey for you. Mm-hmm. So I very intentionally map out what I think you're feeling at the different moments as you're going through whatever it is I'm teaching you. If it's a book, it's like, okay, I know you're starting here probably with your journey. And right now you're questioning things, or you're thinking that may be true for her, but not for me. And so I'm able to really address those. And then as we move through the book, there's lots of callbacks where I weave things in that we already talked about chapters before. So then you feel like, oh yeah, I got that. That's easy. So it makes the difficult things as we move through the book easier because you've already gone on a short journey with me to get that little bit of knowledge. You pop that into your backpack. And then when we pick it back up a couple of chapters later, it's like, oh yeah, I've already got that and I'm ready to move on. Because what I want is at the end of the book or the end of the talk, if you're hearing me speak, or the end of whatever it is I'm working with you on, I want you to feel like I've got this. And this is not that difficult. This is not rocket science, what I teach. It's incredibly easy and simple, and intuitively, you probably know some of these things. It's just being reminded of them, bringing them back to the surface. And then by weaving it into a curriculum, it becomes so much more manageable for you to actually implement it. Because I want you to take action. That's why I'm here. I want you to move. I want you to get yourself unstuck, right? And take the action.
Yes. This is so good. I'm looking at my clock going, how are we at 21 minutes already? So one more question though, if you would, in the book, one of the pages is a page. I don't like the word just, and I just used it. It's a page and it says simply no regrets. Talk to us, if you would, about regrets and how they affect our present and our future.
Yeah, well, I think what's fascinating about regret is the one emotion out of all of the many, many emotions that we experience. Regret is the one scientists have found we will most avoid. We will move to anger. We will move to sadness. We will move to all these other, quote unquote, harder, heavier emotions. We don't like regret. And so, but we all have it, right? Regret is steeped in shame. It's steeped in guilt. It's steeped in all of these ideas that we are a failure. And I wanted to turn that on its head because regret is really what builds resilience. And often it's pushing against regret. That's what shows us what we want. If I were to say right now to your listeners, I want you to make a list of 10 things you really want in your life. What are 10 ideas that you have for purpose? You'd go, 10? Oh, can I just do 2, maybe 1 or 0? But if I said, I want you to make a list of 10 things that you wouldn't want to repeat, things you don't want in your life, you'd say only 10? Can I do 50 or can I do 100? But here's the thing is, if we know what we don't want, it's so much more powerful than knowing what we do. We can push against that regret and build in resilience and understand this is what I want. When I had a season where I felt like I was working so hard, I wasn't spending time with my kids. And I had a season where I felt like I was a bad mom. We all have those moments, right? Those of you with kids know exactly what I'm talking about. You're like, I'm the worst mom. I had a whole season of that, like a full couple of months where I was working way too hard. And that's easy just to look at that regret and go, I'm going to hide that under the bed. I'm going to shove that under the rug and not think about it. But I chose instead to say, I regret that. I don't want that. So let me live a life where I'm not living that. If I don't want to feel like I'm working too hard, what do I want? And I shifted the way that I work. I shifted the hours that I was in the office getting my work done. I shifted the hours that I was working in my home office. And that built in, all of a sudden, I felt so much better. I didn't have another season where I felt like a bad mom. I didn't feel like I wasn't spending enough time with my kids. So I pushed against it. So don't think of it as regret. Think of it as resilience building, an opportunity for you to see exactly what it is you do want.
Oh, absolutely love that. I took my notes on that. I'm going to make a little plaque behind me that says that. Absolutely love that. Thank you so much for pouring into us today. And for everyone listening or watching, where can we get your books? How can we tap into them? And I will link everything. I want everybody to read your stuff.
Thank you. Well, the best place to find my book, you can find my books just about anywhere books are sold. Of course, they're on Amazon and bookshop.org, which is a great place to support independent booksellers. You can also go to my website, tanyadalton.com, and there are links to my books there as well. Okay.
And if someone wanted to reach out to you and send you a message, where is the best place for them to do that?
Well, not on social media, because I am not on social media. I made a very intentional decision to miss out on social media. I have a whole video talking about why I chose that. The best place to connect with me, honestly, is at my website, tanyadalton.com. You can find my podcast there as well. Although anywhere you're listening to this podcast today, after we finish this episode, just do a search for my name or The Intentional Advantage, and you can listen to my podcast. But that's a great way to really connect with me.
Yes, thank you. A question everybody knows I'm going to ask at the end of every podcast is, what, Tanya, is your version of your pow pow shoes?
Yeah, I love this question because I'm sure you've heard some fascinating answers and it's different for everyone. For me, it is waking up and doing a meditation and really grounding myself in what do I want to envision for today. So as part of my morning meditation, I start by focusing in on love, and I focus in on the love I have for my husband and my kids, and I focus on spreading that. And then I practice gratitude. And then I practice forgiveness. I choose one person from my past, could be my recent past, could be my long ago past. Sometimes it's someone from 20 years ago.
Yep.
That I choose to forgive. And I walk through a little forgiveness where I say the things I want to say. I feel the emotions. Then I see it from their point of view. And then I pull the lessons learned. And then I'm able to let it go. And it's amazing how much lighter that makes me feel. And so I start my day doing those three things: focusing on love, focusing on gratitude, focusing on forgiveness. And then I do a quick little visualization of how I want the day to go and where I want to go long term. And that's really powerful. And I feel like that starts my day off, and I feel so confident and grounded getting into my day.
Oh, that's so powerful. Took those notes too. Could you give us, before we have to say goodbye or see you later, would you give us a journal prompt, a writing prompt for our listeners?
Yeah. So let's go back to what we talked about a little bit ago with that idea of what is it you want? Draw two columns and say, instead of saying, what do I want? Let's start with that column of what do I not want to repeat, and put that in the left column. Just make a list. Give yourself, let's say, 5 minutes. List out the things you don't want. And then in that right-hand column, write out the opposite. Okay, if that's not if that's what you don't want, what is it you do? So almost like the exact opposite. And that's going to start giving you a little idea of, this is where I want to move my life, right? And that's so simple, so easy to do. 5 minutes to think of what you don't want. And you might think to yourself, well, I might need 20. That's okay too. 5 minutes is very manageable, but give yourself as much time as you need. List out the things you don't want, and then leave time to do that right-hand column of what you do want. You're going to end that session feeling so much more confident, because guess what? All that stuff that you don't want, you've learned from it. And you're like, wow, that's really powerful. Yes. I have come so far. And I think often we have to know how far we've come in order to see how far we can go in moving forward.
Yes. Oh, thank you so much for hanging out with us today. This has been insightful for me. It's been a joy to have you here, and thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This was a fabulous conversation. I knew it would be before we even hit record.
Thank you so much, Tanya.